thanking God for, among other things, peace of mind during this holiday season. Understanding that peace of mind is not a guarantee. Understanding there seem to be many challenges to us finding peace. I think it's one of the reasons why it tends to be one of my sub-themes. But the reason why it comes to mind right now may go to the revelation and the Christ as he is issuing those very 7 matter-of-fact letters to 7 different churches of the common themes that he has to all of them, whether they are doing well or not so well. One of the common themes is overcome. And so as we sometimes end our videos with, hey, my prayer for you is my prayer for me. Let's start this one off with my prayer for you is my prayer for me. That any obstacles to your peace this holiday season, to the degree you are seeking to take refuge in Christ, my prayer for you is my prayer for me. That he help you overcome the obstacles to your peace this holiday season. As we dive into, Ezekiel chapter 48. And let's just call it Inheritance Continued, as this chapter is going to be dedicated to the 12 tribes of Israel and the inheritance that they will have in this, what some people call utopian Israel. Understanding that the first 7 verses will seem to apportion the land north of the holy district, talking about the apportionment of Dan, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Ephraim, Reuben, and Judah. 7 tribes that will have their inheritance north of the holy district. Verses 8 through roughly 22 seem to talk about the dimensions and the apportionment of the holy district, understanding that it is divided between the sons of Zadok, the priests, in the quote unquote, utopian inheritance of utopian Israel. The Levites, the remainder, those who were not completely loyal to God during the years in which the nation was calling for priests, or I'll call them preachers, to tell them whatever they wanted to hear. These are the ones who strayed but are still welcomed. They are just not welcomed as priests any longer. But those Levites also have an inheritance in this holy district. The remainder goes for the city and the, farmland or garden land. Garden land doesn't sound like a term. It's kind of the farmland that provides the produce for those who work in the city. The remainder of the territory, verses 21 and 22, talking about the portion that stretches east and west of the holy district for the prince. Verses 23 through 29 will go on to talk about the apportionment for the tribes south of the holy district, that being Benjamin, Simeon, Issachar, Zebulun, and Gad, with the final verses 30 through 35, talking about the gates of the city, having 12 gates. There'll be 3 on the north, 3 on the east, 3 on the south, and 3 on the west, according to the tribes of Israel. I guess the couple of things that stood out to me in this chapter more than any was the way in which the ESV did not, in my opinion, do a great job of capturing the meaning, even though I think they captured the literal description or translation of the way in which the land is apportioned. I'll read verse 2, for example, into which goes, Dan, one portion, adjoining the territory of Dan from the east side to the west side, Asher, one portion. That would be a phrase that recurs throughout all of these apportionments. That thought of adjoining territory from the east to the west. What it really seems to mean is bordering, and I'll try to give a visual to help understand why I thought adjoining might have been a great literal translation, but it didn't help me understand what the apportionment actually might have looked like. And so understanding that I'm once again in the area of guesswork, I'm relying heavily on other translations that I looked up, which seem to be more consistent with the way that the land is actually apportioned. Each of the tribes stacked one after another, north to south, as the land was distributed. But getting on to the takeaway, I guess, I had from this chapter. That being the apportionment of the tribes, something that's going to take us back to the very first books of the Bible, as we see the apportionment partially taking place under Joshua, that apportionment being very different from the one we see here in Ezekiel. It seems to be more symmetrical and easy to follow, at least visually, as it's simply evenly distributed, as we mentioned, from north to south. But even before that, before they became a nation, it reminded me of the birth order of the children that will become the fathers of these tribes, and how Rachel was originally the wife that was promised to Jacob, who would become Israel, but through some shadiness, Laban replaced Rachel with Leah and ended up getting an additional 7 years of work promised out of Jacob so that he could get both wives, even though he originally only wanted one. Part of the problem is that turned into a competition between the sisters, reminding me of something we have talked about before, and that is the danger in rejoicing or finding joy in the misfortune of others, even if they are our enemies or our rivals. Understanding that as I looked at that list of the children of Israel, realizing that Rachel ended up dead last on that list, understanding that she was drawn into a contest with her sister Leah after Leah was given children to quite possibly compensate for the fact that she was not actually loved, at least as much, by Israel. She had a lot of kids, and that seemed to rub Rachel the wrong way, to the point where Rachel gave over her servant to have kids, even if she couldn't have her own. But understand, Rachel was eventually going to have kids, but in the list of those born to Israel, she ended up dead last, even though her children were exalted no less than the rest. Actually, Joseph, one of her sons, her firstborn son, ended up being essentially the commander of Egypt, who saved the entire family during the years of famine to come. But as we look at the apportionment of the land to the 12 tribes, it reminded me, going all the way back to the beginning, as we've said, the point at which they were simply 12 sons, how important it is for us even today not to get drawn into competition and resentment in situations where God has simply called us to make progress together.